I caught my fiancée in bed with my closest friend. What are you going to do? Cry, she mocked. I just smiled and walked away. This morning, my phone was flooded with missed calls from both of them. I still can't believe I'm writing this. My hands are trembling, but not from sorrow, from pure fury. This happened yesterday, and my phone hasn't stopped buzzing since. A little background. I'm Noah, 32M. Until yesterday, I was engaged to Kristen, 29F. We had been together for 3 years and engaged for 6 months. My best friend, Brian, 31M, was supposed to be my best man, was being the key word here. Looking back, there were warning signs, small things that made my gut twist, but like a fool, I ignored them. About 4 months ago, Kristen started going to the gym more frequently. Nothing wrong with that, right? Especially since Brian was her trainer. He had been my closest friend since high school, so I trusted him completely. Biggest mistake of my life. She started coming home later, always with some excuse about client meetings running long. Her phone was always face down. She'd get texts late at night, smiling at her screen, but if I walked near, she'd quickly lock it. Classic cheater behavior, right? But whenever I asked, she'd turn around on me. Why are you so controlling? Don't you trust me? God, you're so insecure. Yesterday, I was supposed to be at a site visit until 6 p.m., but the meeting ended early. I decided to grab takeout from her favorite place, thinking I'd surprise her. Guess who ended up getting the real surprise? I knew something was off the moment I pulled into the driveway. Brian's truck was parked outside. He was supposed to be at work. I stood there, holding that stupid bag of food, staring at his license plate. Like if I looked hard enough, maybe it would turn into someone else's. I quietly used my key, stepped inside, and immediately heard noises from upstairs. You know those moments in movies where everything goes silent except for the sound of your own heartbeat? Yeah, that's exactly what happened. All I could hear was them, and the blood rushing in my ears. I pushed open the bedroom door. There they were, in our bed. The bed I helped her pick out when we moved in together. The bed where we talked about our future, our kids, our dreams. Kristen saw me first. And you know what? She didn't even look scared or guilty. She smirked and said, "What are you going to do?" Cry. Brian jumped up, stammering, "Bro, I can explain." I cut him off. "Don't call me bro." My voice was so calm it even surprised me. Kristen pulled the sheets around herself, still smirking. "Well, say something. Go ahead, have your little breakdown." Instead, I pulled out my phone and took a few pictures. They scrambled to cover up. Too late. I looked at them and said, "Thanks for making this easy." Then I turned and walked out. Behind me, Kristen started yelling, "That's it? You're just going to walk away? You coward." I stopped at the doorway, turned back, and said, "No, I'm just getting started." I spent the night at a motel. This morning, my phone exploded. 47 missed calls from Kristen, 23 from Brian. Texts begging me not to tell Brian's wife, Judith. More messages from Kristen, switching between threats and desperate pleas. The best one? "You better not ruin my life over this, or I swear to God, you'll regret it." I haven't responded to any of them, but I did make some calls. First to my bank, then to both our families. You see, what they don't know is that I had been suspicious for weeks. I had proof, lots of it, screenshots, messages, every plan to meet up, every lie they told. Kristen is probably realizing right now that her credit cards aren't working anymore. Our joint accounts? Empty. I moved my half into a new account last night. The engagement ring? Sitting on the kitchen table with a note. Hope he's worth it. Both of their phones are still blowing up my phone. But I'm done talking, they thought. I discovered my fiancée tangled up with my closest companion in our own bed. "What are you going to do? Sob like a child?" she sneered. I simply grinned and walked away. By morning, my phone was bombarded with missed calls from both of them. Even now, I can't believe I'm typing this. My hands are trembling, but not from sorrow. No, this is pure, unfiltered rage. This all unfolded yesterday, and my phone hasn't stopped buzzing since dawn. For some context, I'm Noah, 32M, and until yesterday, I was engaged to Kristen, 29F. We'd been together for 3 years, engaged for 6 months. My so-called best friend, Brian, 31M, was supposed to be my best man, was being the key word here. Looking back, the warning signs were there, small details that twisted my gut, but like a fool, I brushed them aside. Kristen had started hitting the gym more frequently about 4 months ago. Seemed harmless, right? Especially since Brian was her trainer. He'd been my best friend since high school, so I trusted him completely. Biggest mistake of my life. She began coming home late, always armed with some flimsy excuse about meetings running over. Her phone was perpetually placed screen down, receiving messages late at night that made her smirk, until I got too close, and then she'd quickly lock it. Classic red flags. But whenever I questioned it, she'd turn it back on me. Why are you so controlling? Don't you trust me? God, you're so insecure. Yesterday, I was scheduled for a site visit until 6 p.m., but the meeting wrapped up early. I figured I'd surprise Kristen with takeout from her favorite restaurant. Turns out, I was a one in for a shock. The moment I pulled into the driveway, I knew something was wrong. Brian's truck was parked outside. He was supposed to be at work. I stood there, clutching that ridiculous bag of food, staring at his license plate like maybe, just maybe, if I willed it hard enough, it would morph into someone else's. I unlocked the door silently, heard noises from upstairs. You know those moments in movies where everything goes dead silent, except for the sound of a pounding heartbeat? Yeah, that was me. All I could hear was them, and the blood roaring in my ears. I pushed the bedroom door open. There they were in our bed. The bed Kristen and I had picked out together. The same bed where we had whispered about our future, our kids, our dreams. Kristen saw me first. And you know what? She didn't even look scared. Not even remorseful. Instead, she smirked. What are you going to do, cry? Brian scrambled up, stuttering. Bro, I can explain. I cut him off with a voice so eerily calm it startled even me. Don't call me bro. Kristen wrapped a sheet around herself, that smug expression still plastered across her face. Well, say something. Go ahead, have your little meltdown. Instead, I pulled out my phone and snapped a few photos. They tried to cover up. Too late. Thanks for making this easy. Then I turned and walked out. Behind me, Kristen shrieked, That's it? You're just going to leave? You spineless coward. I paused at the doorway, turned back, and said, No, I'm just getting started. I crashed at a motel for the night. By morning, my phone had exploded. 47 missed calls from Kristen, 23 from Brian. Messages flooded in, mostly begging me not to tell Brian's wife, Judith. Kristen's texts oscillated between threats and desperate pleading. The best one? You better not ruin my life over this, or I swear to God, you'll regret it. I ignored them all, but I did make a few calls. First to my bank, then to both of our families. You see, what Kristen and Brian didn't know was that I had been suspicious for weeks. I had proof, loads of it. Kristen had forgotten she was still logged into our shared iPad. I had screenshots, hundreds of them, every message, every plan to meet, every deception. Kristen is probably realizing right now that her credit cards no longer work. Our joint accounts? Emptied. My half safely transferred to a new account. Last night, I left our engagement ring on the kitchen table with a note. Hope he was worth it. Both of their phones are still blowing up, but I'm done responding. They assumed I'd crumble, that I'd throw a tantrum, that I'd break down. Instead, I'm strategizing. Updates to follow. I have a feeling the next few days are going to be very interesting. I also highlighted how she had demonstrated herself to be unreliable in personal matters, and while I couldn't vouch for her professional ethics, I didn't feel comfortable being her reference. The client withdrew their offer. That night, around 9 p.m., Kristen stormed over to my place, absolutely livid, recording everything on her phone, clearly trying to bait me into reacting poorly on camera. You vindictive piece __, you just cost me my biggest deal of the year, she shrieked, stepping aggressively into my space, shoving her phone in my face, desperate to provoke me. I remained unfazed, hands tucked in my pockets, and said in an even tone, "Actions of consequences, Kristen. Maybe you should have thought about that before underscoring my best friend." That's when she completely unraveled. She grabbed my patio chairs and started hurling them at my front door, screaming like a banshee. I calmly stepped inside, locked the door, and called the non-emergency police line while filming the entire meltdown from my window. When the cops arrived, they issued her a warning for disturbing the peace. The moment she realized her little recording scheme had backfired, absolutely priceless. But that wasn't even the highlight of the saga. Remember Brian's wife, Judith? She had every right to know the full extent of the betrayal. I reached out and invited her for coffee, bringing along a neatly compiled folder of all the incriminating screenshots, texts, and photos I had gathered. As she skimmed through them, she maintained an eerie calm until she stumbled upon messages from January. They'd been at this for months, long before I ever suspected anything. Her expression darkened as she continued scrolling through the timestamps of Brian and Kristen's rendezvous. "He told me he was at the gym," she whispered, her voice cracking. "He told me he was working late all those nights." She broke down right there in Starbucks, tears spilling as the realization sank in. But Judith wasn't the type to sit back and cry for long. Her revenge was far more ruthless than anything I could have orchestrated. That Saturday morning, she waited for Brian to begin his usual workout session with his clients. Then she walked straight into the gym, stormed up to him, and, without hesitation, dumped an entire protein shake over his head in front of everyone. The gym fell silent. Then she pulled out her phone and started reading their texts aloud. Every explicit detail, every cruel joke they made at our expense. The fallout was immediate. The video of Brian's public humiliation spread like wildfire across local Facebook groups. Within days, he lost half his clients. Turns out people aren't too keen on trainers who __ their best friend's fiancée. His Instagram following tanked too. So much for his fitness influencer aspirations. Meanwhile, Kristen scrambled to salvage her reputation. She posted a long, melodramatic sob story about how love is complicated and how people make mistakes when they're lost and confused. She even had the audacity to paint herself as the victim. That's when I decided to go nuclear. Remember our engagement party? The one where Kristen gave that teary-eyed speech about how I saved her after her last toxic relationship? How I was the most loyal, trustworthy man she'd ever known. Well, everyone recorded it. I edited together clips of her emotional speech with screenshots of her messages to Brian, planning their secret meetups around my work schedule. Then I posted it as a response to her pity party post. Yesterday, she finally broke down for real. She called me, actually sobbing this time, not the fake, manipulative tears she used at the engagement party. "Noah, please take it down," she begged. "People are calling my parents. My sister won't even speak to me. Brian won't even answer my texts anymore. What am I supposed to do?" I let the silence hang for a moment. Then I simply said, "Cry," and hung up. Her carefully constructed illusion had shattered in the most spectacular fashion. Brian's crashing on a buddy's couch. Judith changed the locks. Kristen's broker is furious over the lost client. And as for our mutual friends, most of them sided with me. Turns out, people don't take kindly to cheaters who mock the ones they betrayed. I'm not finished yet. I still have more evidence, more screenshots, and more truth bombs to unleash. But honestly, watching them sabotage their own lives is far more gratifying than anything I could orchestrate. Brian and Kristen have been relentlessly calling and messaging, pleading to talk things out and find closure. They're panicked because they know I still have plenty of ammunition left. The best part? I feel completely at peace. Every morning, I wake up and thank whatever cosmic force let me come home early that fateful day. Imagine if I had married her, had kids, bought a house. Sometimes, the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the greatest blessing in disguise. Final update incoming. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this all unravels. The ultimate reckoning. Apologies for the delay. These past few weeks have been a whirlwind. But as promised, here's how it all concludes. Grab a drink, because this one's going to be a long ride. Remember when I said I still had some cards left to play? Well, I played every single one. No illegal moves. Nothing that could land me in trouble. Just a strategic, methodical takedown of their reputations. They want to play games? Fine. I play to win. First up, Kristen. I couldn't shake the memory of her sneering at me. What are you going to do? Cry. Those words echoed in my head. So I made a few phone calls. It turns out that my neighbor's security camera had a crystal clear view of our driveway. For months, Kristen had been sneaking Brian over whenever I had late shifts or was out of town. I compiled everything, timestamps, text messages from our shared iPad, the ones she forgot to delete, and waited. Last week was her big moment. A crucial pitch to an affluent couple looking to invest in real estate. She'd been boasting about this deal for months. The commission alone would have set her up financially for the entire year. Guess who happened to be a close friend of that couple? My cousin, Edgar. One simple conversation about Kristen's questionable business ethics, backed up with undeniable proof of her infidelity, and they walked away. Deal canceled. But it didn't stop there. Small towns have one defining trait. Word travels fast. And when people asked, I didn't spread rumors. I simply provided evidence. Her phone started lighting up with cancellations. Turns out, home buyers prefer realtors who don't sleep with their clients' spouses. Oh, and Brian? Some of those clients were his. Now, let's talk about Brian. His wife, Judith, had suspected something was off for a while, but never had solid proof. So I gave her everything, texts, videos, timestamps. The receipts were undeniable. The fallout? Spectacular. Brian came home one evening to find his belongings scattered across the front yard, and the locks changed. Judith wasn't playing. She works at the same gym where Brian trained his clients. Guess who suddenly had scheduling conflicts with all his high-paying customers? The best part? They turned on each other instantly. Brian blamed Kristen for being too obvious. Kristen blamed Brian for being careless. Their once passionate affair crumbled under the weight of its own recklessness. And then, the grand finale. Last night, I was out with friends at a local bar when they walked in together. Kristen spotted me and stormed over, venom dripping from her words. You're pathetic, she spat. Destroying our lives just because you couldn't handle the truth. I simply smiled. Handle the truth? Honey, I'm handling it just fine. How's that big commission working out for you? Brian tried to step in, but I wasn't finished. And you? Man, how's the personal training business? Judith mentioned the gym is reconsidering your employment. Something about client complaints. He lost it. He swung at me. Big mistake. Huge. I may work behind a desk now, but I didn't grow up soft. 10 seconds later, he was face down on the floor, his nose bleeding. And the best part? I didn't even get kicked out. The bartender saw everything and confirmed that Brian threw the first punch. Just to be safe, I filed a police report. And Kristen? Her real estate firm called her in for a formal review. Turns out, sleeping with client spouses and tanking major deals raises a few red flags. She's on probation, pending further investigation. Brian? Facing divorce, bleeding clients, and on the verge of losing his job. Their once thrilling affair is now a dumpster fire. Last I heard, they're fighting nonstop, pointing fingers, and blaming each other for the mess they created. As for me, I met someone. Her name is Aspen. She's a complete opposite of Kristen. Honest, upfront, no mind games. We're taking things slow, but it feels real. She knows my story, understands why I keep receipts for everything now, and respects that. Here's the thing. Revenge isn't about breaking the law or physically hurting someone. It's about making sure people face the repercussions of their own actions. Maybe with a little push in the right direction. They assumed I was weak because I walked away that night. They mistook patience for weakness. Big mistake. Karma isn't A__. She's just exceptionally thorough with her paperwork and has impeccable timing. Edit. Holy__. This blew up. Thank you all for the support, awards, and messages. To answer a few common questions. Yes, everything I did was legal. I simply ensured that the right people had the right information at the right time. No, I'm not worried about retaliation. If they tried, they have to explain their actions first. Aspen is fully aware of everything and agrees they got exactly what they deserved. A mutual friend, Dean, told me Brian has been couch surfing after Kristen kicked him out last week. Apparently, even she's had enough. Life has a funny way of working out. 2 months ago, I thought my world was falling apart. Now, I realize it was simply making space for something better.